Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. We are now going to look at SERCO. We certainly acknowledge the amazing research and work that Field McConnell over at Able Danger has done for many, many years revealing SERCO. This ties in precisely with the Senior Executive Service. But before we start giving you our revelations, we want to take a moment and just give you kind of a basic SERCO 101 so you understand what this thing is.
Okay, this is great. We're building a bridge, the bridge from SES to SERCO. And people, as you just said, Field McConnell put us onto this. Now, Field, we were so busy with just showing people what SES is and the obfuscation, the subterfuge, the booby traps, and the tripwires all put into place to keep you out. And we got in. And now with help of Michael McKibben and Americans for Innovation and others, we have a searchable database of the list that the government will give us of who SES is and what we know about them. And what we know about them is a very sad picture because it has revealed truly, truly the shadow government. And these are basically 8,000 Obama appointees or people that he raised up to those positions during his 8-year term, and others that have been in this process for a long time. So now you say, okay, you've now revealed in the federal government, which has 4.5 million employees. Okay, so you showed us 10,000 people who seem to be the bosses of everybody. They can't get fired once they're appointed. They get paid more than everybody. They control everything. They slow everything down. They slow walk stuff. They stonewall stuff. They're the people who don't give the information from the DOJ to the Congress or from the FBI to the Congress. That's who those people are. So we got that part. Now what we need to understand is how did that took over our federal government, which is trying to basically completely destroy any of our U.S. constitutional rights or any rights in the Bill of Rights, and basically have a government running no matter who's elected. And they are the buffer between even those newly elected appointed people who are supposed to be in charge of those federal agencies to keep them from doing their work. So why do we go to SERCO next? Well, because Field pointed us in that direction. He pointed us in the direction of the Qwars 11, and we did big exposés on that. That led to Richard C. Walker's Internet of Things through, thank you very much, Michael McKibben. We got a correction the other day. Someone said that we said something wrong. We did. I said vigilant instead of agilant. It's a company run by Richard C. Walker. He came out of HP, Hewlett-Packard, and started this company, which now has a patent for all surveillance worldwide. So practically anything that comes into existence that has anything to do with the cyber war that we're in, from G5 and to wireless, G5 wireless to bombs to the new hypersonic bombs, missiles, and so on and so forth. All this, it's all rolled into that. So what we're talking about now is how does this group of people then sell out America? And why do they sell out America? And what is the intent? We've shown you that SES members are basically, they're paid off first off, and then they're brainwashed, and they're, of course, indoctrinated into believing that America should be globalist, that transnational companies should run America, that anyone we do business with, it doesn't matter who they are. They can be China, they can be Israel, they can be Britain, they can be Australia. It doesn't matter. And especially if one of the Five Eyes, if it's New Zealand, Australia, Canada, Britain, America, we share all of our information. Guess what? Those are also our enemies. Because why? That's the Queen. If anyone ever thought we got away from the British government, then you didn't study history, because we are not out of the control of the British government. Look at the U.S. Federal Reserve and who it was that benefits from that, the original families. Look at the owners of the central banks. Look at the major owners of Vanguard, the major owners of T. All the major investment and asset holding companies, many of them go back to the City of London, which is another way to... The Queen, of course, gets her piece of the pie. And as you know, in England, why am I saying Queen, Queen, Queen? I'll get there in a second. The Queen doesn't even have to divulge any of her business. It's illegal for the Parliament or anyone in Britain or the Commonwealth, 51 nations or whatever it is, 54, 51, I think it's 51 nations in the Commonwealth. No one can question the Queen's business. Now, she is one of the richest people in the world because she does what? She controls mining. She controls what comes out of the earth, resources. What are wars fought over? Oil, gold, rare metals, uranium. Queen has cornered the market. Now, we can go into that, and we will in the future. But let's just say, when you talk about SERCO, SERCO goes, it started in America, it went to England, and it's been there ever since. And basically, it's the company that they say, it's the biggest company you've never heard of that controls England, Canada, and America. We're going to be doing a release of an intelligence report in the next couple of days to get you warmed up on this, and then we're going to hammer on this for a while because now we're going to show how the SES is in the pocket of companies like SERCO.
Better yet, how the SES is really under British rule, if you look at the chain of command here.
Well, in a very real sense. The SES is in direct
alignment, let's say, because
Yeah.
they work together. They make sure that contracts go to SERCO. And remember, you've got all these SES people that have totally been indoctrinated at the Senior Executive Institute and other institutes like this, where these people are brainwashed. And I don't know what they use. Some suggest they even use this MK Ultra stuff so that they're walking around believing in the globalist agenda.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And what is really going on here is a sellout to all corporations, and those corporations in many cases are being driven by the people who stand behind nations. For instance, let's just show you a little bit. Let's pull back the blindfold. Since 1984, we sold out our uranium market to the Russians. We buy their depleted uranium from their missiles, downgrade it, bring it to Paducah, Kentucky, where an American paid for, by American taxpayers, paid for the Paducah, Kentucky enriching and downblending facility. And so we brought it over, and this was arranged through a corporation called the United States Enrichment Corporation, and it started trading on the New York Stock Exchange, and George Bush and the Clintons and all their insider cronies who knew this was coming down bought into that, and they made a fortune for 20 years. And basically, Russia controlled our uranium. They controlled 50% of the uranium used in our nuclear facilities. And we'll come to the fact that we don't need any of those nuclear facilities anymore. You replace them with thorium. Every nuclear power plant can be retrofitted for thorium. Thorium is one of the most abundant substances on the earth. It costs next to nothing. And we would finally have some free energy.
Now, Thomas, there are so many directions that we could go in this audio, but the purpose of today's audio is just to give people a fundamental understanding of SERCO.
Well, this is the warm-up. So, when the Paducah facility went down, another facility was built by American taxpayer dollars in Eunice, New Mexico, under the aegis of being the Louisiana Energy System, the LES. Fake, lie. Or the National Enrichment Facility, fake, lie. It was built by us. Cost overrun, it was supposed to be $1 billion. Cost overruns from the company that built it, Urenco, who also has facilities in England, in Germany, and in Holland. Cost overruns went to over $4 billion. So they gouged us when they built it. Now, the Russians dig up our uranium, which, remember, the Uranium One scandal is about the CFIUS committee allowing Uranium One to be bought by basically Rosatom, basically Russia. And so that had to go through a lot of clearances, which Jeff Sessions turned his blind eye to, Hillary Clinton approved, and Barack Obama signed off on. Many, many people had to be involved in this. They all had to be paid off, either through lobbyists or through direct payments. We know that Hillary Clinton, $145 million. Bill Clinton got $200 million through the Clinton-Juster Sustainability Growth Fund. We know that McCabe got his payoff. We know that Mueller got his payoff. Why? They were all delivering yellow cake uranium from the facility to Putin, so Putin would say, yeah, I'm going in for this deal. Okay? So that facility was started in 2003, and some of these things were put into play a long time ago. But now, what happens? Who is Urenco? Totally owned by the Queen, you might as well say, by Britain. And why do we allow the most expensive substance on the face of the earth to be ripped off from us. Putin digging it up, Putin taking it to the Queen enriches it, gives it back to Putin delivers it to our nuclear facilities, gouges, and we know this through the entire Uranium One scandal, not only of the payoffs, but also the bribery, the extortion, some even say murder, but these people were put in jail. 10am. Okay, so 10am is like a Russian company ripping us off. How did they do that? Because all the SES members allow this to go across their desk because they're all working in a union together. And that's a fact. We're not making this up. So everyone's in on it. They're either paid off through lobbyists, SES, or if they are really an honest person trying to do an honest day's job and they're an appointee or something, they're going, well, I don't have any power. These people stop me. So that was the buildup to show you that the next thing I'm about to tell you is true. And we've already revealed all the things about the U.S. Enrichment Corporation. We've done article after article about these things I've just talked about, Urenco, and the whole rip-off of our nuclear industry, and we need to go to using thorium. In Europe, thorium's going crazy. In Asia, it's going crazy. They're going to replace all the nuclear power plants with thorium. In America, it hasn't started because the last moments of rip-off for uranium are happening right here. And there's another company that took over for Uranus, United States Enrichment Corporation, which should have been the Russian Enrichment Corporation, or it should have been the George Bush and Bill Clinton Enrich Myself Corporation, because that's what happened. They got to do this in the last moments and the last breaths of uranium. Now, if they did that with uranium, how about plutonium? The company that replaced them after they went bankrupt and ripped us off with the U.S. Enrichment Corporation, a company called, I believe it's called Free Energy. It also has other names. They've changed names repeatedly, and just recently, I think because we outed them. But they're going to get all the plutonium from all of our missiles, and they're going to downgrade all of that and sell it back to us.
Okay, but what is the relationship to these companies like Urenco to what we're trying to describe here as SERCO?
Same people.
Okay,
Same people own Urenco, who took over the enrichment in America and brought in Canadian uranium to undercut the price of our uranium that the Russians. So we have wars going on in our markets for things that are being fought by foreign enemies. And I'm calling Britain an enemy. I'm sorry if you all don't know Britain's an enemy.
Well, not the people, because we love our friends over there in Britain. But Thomas, let's get back to SERCO.
SERCO is one of the same.
SERCO is a huge conglomeration of many companies that reach into the service industry, to the uranium industry, all over the board, and they all sweep up back to the Queen. And the people that are out here in the senior executive service, they make sure that the contracts that the United States would have go to these SERCO companies. And then all along the way, people are getting their cut. Is that a correct?
Yes. And for some reason, they get all these contracts for sensitive cyber data.
So really, our national borders have already been obliterated with this beast called SERCO. And it's not only the United States. Now, we have listeners all around the world. Pay attention, please, patriots. SERCO is in your country, too, ripping you off.
Oh, in Britain, there are multiple lawsuits. And 4GS, another company that often works with them for security purposes and data management, is also being sued. And they're being sued everywhere because everywhere they look, they find that the ripoff is huge. It's just astounding. So they may be going down very seriously in Britain, but in America, they're rising like a star. And so SERCO, as you say, has contracts not only in the military. When we list all of the contracts that they have, you will not believe it. It controls your license. It controls immigration, the data for immigration. It controls patents. It controls economics. It controls the military. It controls military intelligence. You cannot name vaccines. You cannot name anything in your life that SERCO doesn't touch practically if there's data being managed.
So the Queen of England is getting a cut off of all of us.
The Queen of England is doing exactly like Facebook is doing. She's, okay, let's be more specific.
And who is this woman? I mean, I have British friends that they will speak in such an enamored way about the Queen. And I'm like, whoa, what are they putting in your water? Don't you understand what she is doing to your country?
we don't need to bash the Queen. Let's move it over to who runs the Queen's money, the City of London. Now, the City of London has in it what's called the gold bullion vault, which is really the same old gold that the Rothschilds have been using to create fiat currency in England since they began. There are 30,000 paper notes written on that gold. So every ounce of gold there has been sold 30,000 times. This is the kind of ripoff we're talking about. Gold Core and the Nova Scotia Gold Exchange recently, when the fake gold from China, the counterfeit gold from China was flooding the markets, people said, well, show us that I have gold there. You say I have gold, show me the gold. No gold. They opened the largest gold trading vault in Canada, in other words, City of London, because that's a Commonwealth, right? And what was there? No gold, except some gold that was set over on the side reserved for really some deep staters. I forget exactly who it was, but they reserved their gold and no one could touch it. But the people who bought gold cannot redeem it. We chase this down. You cannot redeem gold. And Gold Core, the company ran by Frank Giustra, that donated $100 million, he's Uranium One. He started off with Eurasia, became Uranium One, sold it to ARMS, they sold it to Rosatom, and Putin now controls it. And that was all approved by all these people all down the line. And we couldn't figure out how it was true until we researched what Field McConnell pointed at, which was SES and SERCO. So every spec, for instance, any crime you're going to mention, look closely and they will say, oops, that criminal, the fact that there was a person who killed people recently the fact that they had gone into a mental institution and they were still carrying a gun in a state that doesn't allow that was SERCO information. When things slip through and people aren't caught and the data doesn't show the criminal and doesn't act on the criminal, that's because SERCO is about 65% fake. They say they're managing the data, but we now know in England, in Canada and Australia and other places, that it's completely fake. So when you look into it hard, you find that they're doing about 65% of their job and the rest just slips through the cracks and nobody cares because nobody cares. SES has been told this is who gets the contracts. Now, most of you have never heard of SERCO. You may not believe what we're saying. We're going to prove it to you in the next few weeks. Soon we'll have an article out on this. But you could also right now go to Able Danger and look up what Field McConnell has to say about it. But you won't see many people talking about this. You'll see nobody talking about it except him. And we're going to now bring it out like we did SES. And we're going to say to people, if you don't address this, then you're part of the problem. This is a corporate.
Well, they could be alt media personalities that are actually paid by entities that are supportive of senior executive service and SERCO.
SERCO, I am certain that SERCO is so deep in Hollywood that when we see how deep it is, you'll just say basically SERCO owns Hollywood. Same thing with many service industries where you have to process information, and it doesn't really matter if the information is correct because they aren't correct. They're horrible. They are simply a company that says they can do anything, but they can't. And why did they get the contract? Because SES people who are being paid elite salaries with elite payroll plans. More
than our military. I keep bringing that up. It's a real sore spot for me when I see soldiers and their pay, and then I compare it to the do-nothing rats in SES getting these humongous salaries.
Very good point. When you see problems happening in the military, people don't get paid, hospital information, VA hospital information is all messed up, so on and so forth. That's SERCO.
SERCO, yeah.
That's SERCO. They handle all that information.
So they make sure that our military is not treated well while their fat cats are rolling around in their big cars, sitting in their big suburban houses outside of Washington, yucking it up and thwarting the will of the people to get things done.
And when you see huge hacks in the government and in corporations, that's because SERCO was managing it. They don't cover anything. They don't have good security. Anyone can hack into them. They only do 65% of the job they're hired to do. They get non-bid contracts. For instance, they got $1.2 billion for handling the Obamacare information after we paid how much to a Canadian company? Hello, City of London, Britain, the Queen. We paid a Canadian company I forget. I would get angry if I could remember exact amount we paid them to simply create a web page. And then who handled that information? $1.2 billion a year? SERCO. SERCO, a British company, handled the Obamacare information. This is what I'm talking about, folks. So that 1 year, just in the first year they handled that, they not only had $1.2 billion in contracts for the government, they also had a $1.2 billion contract for Obamacare. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. We have yet to dig. And when we start to dig, we're going to find the following. Wherever you charge the most amount of money for services and or resources, you will find the City of London, the Queen. The Queen owns, the Queen's real assets, they'll tell you she has a few hundred billion. That's nonsense. It's in the trillions simply because of the 51 Commonwealth nations. She actually owns the rights. I wish I remembered off the head. Tenet. What is the name of her company? Anyway, she has a company which is the number one company for mining in the world. Everything else pales.
Don't worry about it. I'm sure some of our really smart listeners
will
fill it in and we'll pin it to the top.
It's hard to find it anyway, and we've already written about it. So all you'd have to do is put in, do a search for Queen's resources, and it would come right up on Aim for Truth. Because we've already talked about all this, and it's so shocking that we thought everybody knew this, but I guess most people don't.
So what we're going to do over the next few weeks, we're going to start populating the internet with articles on SERCO. We ask all of you guys out there that are also smithies to send us your articles and videos so that we can keep that information percolating in the internet. And then one other thing is this connection with senior executive service really concerns me, because we keep advocating that this is an unconstitutional group that is operating in our government and needs to be eliminated immediately, even if the president has to reduce their salaries to $1 a year. I mean, you have to do what you have to do. What did you expect to see in the swamp but a bunch of rats just eating like bottom feeders? We've got to get rid of them. And if we can get rid of them, perhaps then maybe our contracts that we're issuing out can be competitive, and we can avoid these things like SERCO with all these international entanglements.
We have the Office of Personal Management that handles our civil service. SES is separate. If there are good people in SES who came up through the ranks and deserve it by merit, then they can shift back over to the GS 60.
But there needs to be a process.
16, 17, and 18, and we don't need SES.
And also, Thomas, these people got their jobs without going through proper security clearances. There are big questions on that security clearance form that they didn't have to answer. So if they go through the process again to get civil service jobs, they need to stand in line, just like any of our immigrants trying to get in the country. They need to do it the right way. They need to fill out all the paperwork and then be placed in jobs where they have skills and talents, because that's the other thing about SES. They're put anywhere and they don't necessarily have the talents and skills to run the organizations or departments that they're placed in.
Look at the job SERCO did for Obamacare. Nothing could have been worse. Now, SERCO handles top secret information. Guess who gives them their clearances? Someone in Britain. Why is someone in Britain giving someone handling U.S. top secret security information and data, not even going through our clearance system, exactly as you say? So that's how they are connected in a way. SERCO gets the right to literally, if they wanted, if they turned off everything they were doing for us, America would screech to a halt. Military, government, and corporate. States, everything. It would all screech to a halt. You wouldn't have any place to verify any information. So what we saw as the U.S. Digital Service gathering all this up for Eric Schmidt, that's one of the factions fighting. But remember, Eric Schmidt and Alphabet, which is now the mother company of Google, they are not American. They are not part of America. They are a corporation, and they are in war. They are at war with us, and the Queen is at war with us. She wants to fleece us. Britain wants to fleece us as much as they possibly can, and they're doing a great job because SES members allow other people who literally, you could have a the quickest way to, let me put it this way. Spies come into this country through SES, okay? They don't go through any clearance. So if
Was Imran Awan paid through SES?
Well, it's now come out that 40 people waived, 40 people in the U.S. Congress, 40 Congress people signed a waiver. So Imran Awan and his group, his gang of 4 other IT people, waived having them to have a clearance. They were handling top secret information, and they did not have a clearance. And we have pointed this out before. Andre Carson, and I can name others, but I'll just name him because he's the person who, on the recommendation of Meeks, brought Imran Awan in. That was the fake way they brought them into the Congress. He was brought in through lottery. They use lottery whenever they're bringing in spies. He was probably trained at the Clinton Executive Institute in New York at the Google Center.
I just wanted to make sure we didn't get too far out in the Imran Awan story.
Oh, yeah, well, okay. I can get way out there. But the point is, you asked the question, and
yes.
I do believe now that of the 40 who signed off him having any security clearance background check, what was that about? Then they demanded for a year and a half, Andre Carson and others I could name, on that committee, on the House Permanent Select Intelligence Committee, to demand that Imran Awan have access to the SCIF, to the Secure Compartmental Information Facility. In other words, he didn't have a clearance, and they demanded that he have the highest clearance anyone can have in the Congress? This is all happening, folks. This is the way it happens.
Like I always say, is that everyone in the world has more information about America. Americans are the ones that don't have information on our government, because Hillary Clinton has got a server with all her intel open to anybody who wants to pay her a fee. You've got SERCO running our intelligence agencies. This is just an abomination on what America should be. So wrap it up. Tell us what we need to do, Thomas, in order to come together as patriots to overcome the evil that has infiltrated our country and our government.
The intelligence 5 eyes are used for things like they ask the Brits to come over and use Fort Meade to spy on Trump. This is what we do. We ask the Israeli Mossad to come over whenever we need operations done in our country. We ask that George Bush Sr. lived at the palace of King Saud after he was president, and the Saudi Arabian intelligence is thick through everything. So if you think for 1 second that you do not have Israelis, Saudi Arabians, Australians, Brits, Germans, Dutch, Canadians getting every speck of information, sensitive information in America, you're incorrect. We now know that Facebook sells it.
But
we had already revealed that long before.
What do we need to do to move forward, to make progress?
We simply have to say no more transnational contracts. Now, the way they get around that is they're going to say, oh, but Urenco has an office in America, and it has a different name. Putin changed his 10X company, which handles uranium, to 10M in America. And then they think it's not Russian? We need to
Well, that sounds like Qualcomm and Broadcom.
Exactly. We need to vet transnational companies, and we need to give priority to national companies that do not do business and share our information and our IP. I mean, that's what this war with China is all about. It was corporations who took their businesses to China, and China, of course, then got the intellectual property of the computers, the microchips that they were building. Same thing happened in Israel with Intel. Same thing happens with Britain. Same thing happens with ex-members of the Israeli Unit 8200, which now has 100 high-tech companies in Silicon Valley and throughout America that have government contracts. Folks, America was sold out. There was no America. It was sold out. And SERCO is proof of that. SES is the mechanism, and Urenco and 10M and the U.S. Enrichment Corporation. I can go on and on and on and on. We're going to reveal this through SERCO, because SERCO is a perfect example of the way that if you understand the mechanism of SES and the elites who are paid to be corporate globalists, then you can understand how we got in the mess we're in and why people call these things conspiracies instead of the realities that we are bringing to you as intelligence reports here at aimfortruth.org.